Hello, hello, welcome. We will give everyone a moment or two to get settled before we dive in to today's webinar. While we're waiting just a moment, if you would drop your name, your role, and your experience so far, like, are you using Chat for Schools? Are you exploring it? Um, have you been using it for a while? Just put in your experience so I just kind of know how fast or how slow I can go today. And then also, if you need a demo account access to be able to explore today. Right. If you're in a place to do so, feel free to drop your response, name, role, experience with Chat for Schools. Love it. Thanks for sharing, Melanie. I'll kind of make sure as well when we get to the point to kind of explore that if you do need some access, I'll drop a link in the chat. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll jump in. Before I get started, I just want to kind of put a disclaimer out there that we did have this webinar last month. It is the same content. So if you did join us for the Impactful Tutors step-by-step last month, this will be reiterated. So if you're here again for extra practice, that's great. And if you are here and ready to grab this info for the first time, really appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully for those of you that are supporting Chat for Schools, maybe in a pilot, like I see in the chat, hopefully some of the things that we go over today can be beneficial to how you can support your teachers going into the fall and really making the best use out of the tools that live within Chat for Schools. So feel free to ask questions in the chat along the way. I'll keep my eyes in there. I'm totally cool with you interrupting, just making sure that you get everything that you need. So I'll keep my eyes there, as will Sam. So yes, feel free to ask questions along the way. And we will probably have some time at the end if you have some further questions. So I will jump on in. Today's agenda is we'll just kind of give you an introduction of who we are at Skillstruck. We'll kind of talk about why specialized tutors can be super impactful in the classroom. And then we're going to go through some tips for making really impactful tutors. And then we'll try it together. So we'll do some step-by-step instructions and we'll have some time for you to dig in. I'm going to provide you with a scenario and you'll have kind of a clear visual and idea for how this can really be specific in classrooms. So just going to pause these notifications so I don't get distracted. So we are Skillstruck. So we have been supporting schools and districts since 2017, starting with that computer science. So if you are just a new to Skillstruck fan or user for Chat for Schools, we did start our journey here with computer science. And then with that really widespread phase and kind of panic over AI, we've been really supporting schools with where we go with this and really applying a lot of the strategies and the way that we prefer to teach students about technology skills, just embedding all of what we learned from computer science into our AI platform. My name is Jessica. I don't think I have an intro slide here, but probably should introduce myself as well. I am in Wisconsin. Before joining Skillstruck, almost 3 years ago, I was an innovation coach for 5 years. So I helped integrate technology and project-based learning into elementary classrooms. And then I also taught all students technology as well. So definitely a similar role to perhaps some of you here. So if you ever need any advice on helping teachers integrate tech, feel free to reach out to me. But the first thing I want to kind of explore is we're going to really dig into specialized tutors today and kind of think about what other components of Chat for Schools can support specialized tutors. But with that, like, why are these important? Why can they be beneficial in our classrooms? One reason is they're super, super great for personalization. So as we walk through some ideas today, I'm going to kind of lead the conversation or at least put some thoughts into your minds of, okay, your teachers know students best. Your teachers will know your students the best. So what are some ways that you can view histories or view different things and really take into account what your students need? And our specialized tutors can be really great at personalizing support for students. Along with that, it also is a great way to provide some structure into the use of AI. So when we think about using a chat tool, a lot of our users have not wanted their students to dive right into a chat tool, but with specialized tutors, you can really provide a lot of structure to that experience for students, keeping it super focused on a specific learning standard, attaching it with some formative assessment questions, never providing them with answers. So there's a lot of structure that specialized tutors can put in place for not only AI, but just learning with technology in general. Ooh. So one thing that I want to just provide is an example, kind of a creative example of how specialized tutors have been used by our current teachers in classrooms. Our next webinar is actually going to highlight a variety of these, but today I just wanted to pick out one. For those of you who are really thinking about where this can go with your students, our teachers who are using this have been super, super creative and really bringing this into a variety of classrooms. And so when you think about using specialized tutors and where does it fit in, like it can fit in anywhere. And so this is an example of how a technology teacher used our specialized tutors to be a critic. So this specific tutor and this assignment was for students to do a video game pitch. And so this teacher kind of found that a lot of students were turning in work that was nowhere near ready. I'm sure we all know what that is like. Um, so he was thinking, okay, what could I do to have students put a little bit extra thought, some work, and actually turn in uncompleted assignment before I have to go and read, I don't know, maybe a few sentences that they turned in and spend all this time grading all of this work that's really incomplete, sending it back to students, and then them having to turn in another iteration. And so with this video game pitch critic, the tutor was acting in 3 different personas. So it came from that marketing lens, it came from an aesthetic lens, and then that technical piece as well. And what that tutor did was it gave robust feedback on those pitches. And each time a student interacted with it, the critic then would come back with like a grade. So until that pitch came up to a grade A, and of course you can modify that for whatever works for your kind of scales and what you like students to kind of shoot for there. But for this case, it looped until it was like, this is great. This is an A. You can turn this into your teacher now. So kind of eliminated a little bit of that back and forth and allowed students to have feedback on what they were creating. This here, and I won't read through all of this, but this is an example from a student's chat history from this pitch critic. So as many of you may know or may not know, you're able to view full chat history, full tutor history within Chat for Schools. So when you're thinking about, again, some of that structure or personalization, you're going to have some true insight on how students went from their starting point, okay, maybe their first line of their video game pitch, to where they ended. And also be able to have complete insight on what the AI interaction was and what kind of information they were providing that student. So what it came back with then was it went in and it brought in each of these personas. Like, here's my feedback from that business and marketing lens. Here's the feedback from the design, and here's feedback from that technical lens. So as you kind of think about different ways to use specialized tutors, really consider how you can pull in some different personas. We're going to play around with that a little bit today, but this has been super, super beneficial for having really structured feedback for students. And it can be really easily done. So you may be like, wow, this is super cool, but that probably took them hours. It did not, and we'll kind of go through and you'll see how quickly we can come up with some of these ideas today. So we're going to run through some tips for creating these successful tutors, and then we're actually going to put that into action. So you'll be able to practice and see how this can all come together in one place. So my first tip for yourself, or even if you're like, okay, I need to really start thinking about how I'm going to approach teachers with this or what kind of information I could provide them, is be intentional with the main goal of your tutor. And this is where I really like to have conversations about AI is not replacing the teacher's role in the classroom. So you as the teacher, or maybe you as the coach, helping the teachers think this through, like, what is the main goal of what you want the tutor to tutor the students on? If you're looking at a batch of standards, which ones are your students really, really struggling with? And really think through what the tutor could interact with, the goal of that. And then you can kind of go from there. So if you are thinking like, oh, I want to help them with writing. Okay, what about writing? Organization, being super clear with your introduction, like what about that is really the goal? So really being intentional with that. And then with that intention, also being specific with your subject or topic. So like you saw with that video game pitch critic, provide some different personas, but give some ideas of what you want those personas to be, how you want them to interact, what do you want them to focus on. Okay, you saw like business and marketing, art and design, like very specific personas there acting in the background. And I really do recommend, as much as possible, utilizing those learning standards. So really being able to bring it back to standard-based, really being able to dig into different strands is going to be where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, and where that tutor is going to continue to pull back from. Keeps them on track for sure. We're going to explore attaching helpful reference materials like a rubric, providing special instructions to your tutor, and then of course, always engage with it in this preview mode prior to sending it out to students. So don't just fill it in and export, try it out, make sure it is doing exactly what you intend it to do. And if it's not, regenerate, go back to the drawing board, ask Chat for Schools, the chat for help. So these are some things that we are actually going to explore right now. So we are going to use some different resources within Chat for Schools to make successful tutors. I think it's really great to be able to utilize what is already created for our teachers to help them get started with this, and to perhaps even help them be creative and a little bit more confident in this. So I'm going to provide you all with a scenario, and I am going to copy and paste some of these standards right into the chat, trying to make this as easy as possible today. If you do not have a Chat for Schools account, please let me know in the chat and I'll make sure that I drop a demo link. If you are a current user, you'll be able to just go right into your account. Or you can just sit back and relax and watch what I showed today. That's fine as well. Sometimes it's great to get hands on throughout some of these things. So our scenario today is that you've just entered a narrative writing unit with your 6th grade students. You are exploring a creative way to engage students in mastering this standard. Write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events using effective technique, relevant descriptive details, and well-structured event sequences. Okay. So now taking this to the next level and kind of bringing in that teacher's role and that really thinking about your classroom and what your students need. I'm also going to take this a little step further and kind of help teachers think about, okay, here's one standard that's kind of broad, and that's totally fine to use with a tutor. A tutor will do a great job at this, but let's hone it in even further. So your students are specifically struggling with these two strands. These strands being engaging the reader by establishing an introduction of the narrator, the characters, organization, all that good stuff, and using narrative techniques such as dialogue, pacing, description. Okay, so those are what our students are specifically struggling with that we're going to take into account when we're building out this tutor. And then what we're going to do here is we've decided that we're going to engage students in a challenge to create a short story that'll be featured in a school or a local newspaper. Okay, so that's our scenario. So let's just pretend we're a sixth grade teacher, and this is what we're going to be doing to try to engage our students in being creative with writing. So our next steps are going to be, I'm going to scooch on over into Chat for Schools, and we're going to really lay out how this could work. So as I exit out here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these two prompts in the chat just so that you can copy and paste. Make it easy for you. Or again, you can just hang out, watch, stick around. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do, and we're going to be hopping around a little bit, so bear with me. Hopefully you'll get your practice into some navigation here. But what we're going to do is first, I want you to open up your Tutor Creator. And we're going to have that open. We're going to open a chat, and then we're going to open Learning Studio. So we're going to be bouncing around a little bit. But within our Tutor Creator, if you open this up and you can click New Tutor, we're going to fill out some of our fields, but we're also going to use the chat tool to help us. Okay, so you can provide your tutor with a name. I'll just do a newspaper editor. Again, maybe your teachers will know a little bit more of who your students are into right now, and they could even give, a really fun character, or kind of think through like what kind of editor is in a TV show or something like that. Maybe The Office, maybe not. So what we'll do is we'll give our tutor a name. And then here during subject or topic is where I really want to point out how we can use the chat tool to support some really robust, strong instructions there. So in the chat, I copied and pasted a chat prompt that says, provide me with instructions to help tutor and critique student work. Okay, so whatever I put in the chat there, we're going to scooch on over into the Chat for Schools. So just open up where you can open up a new chat in the actual platform. And within that chat tool, it is that really nice collaborative space they can really go back and forth with. And I really want to leverage that this can be used to come up with super creative ideas for our tutor within minutes. So I'll put in that prompt there. So I'm just asking the chat to create instructions for this tutor for me. I'm putting in that learning standard, and I'm putting in those couple of things that I want students to make sure they're being tutored on. And then I also have that little statement in there to include two different critics or personas. So I'll send this in and I'll see what this comes up with. Okay, and so it comes up with some instructions for me here. It's going to have like a little reviewer persona. And this is where, again, your teachers are going to have to put on that little extra hat there and think, what do my students need from this tutor? Okay, so if you're looking through this and you're like, okay, this is really great. We have a balanced introduction. We're going to analyze the organization and so on. So what you could even do further then is think through, okay, so I really would rather have the persona be an organization persona. Okay, and it's going to come through and give you some instructions. What you can do from there then is take whatever you like from what the chat is providing you with and just paste it right into those special instructions. So I'm going to go through, I like this real world stakeholder idea. I'm going to come through, I'll just copy that, paste that in here. What I also like to do is I'll just enter a couple of times. I just like to reiterate the standard that we are working on. Never hurts to have that being in play, although it is what is taking into consideration with those instructions. So that's why I really like using the chat tool as well, because it's really picking apart that standard and some of those strands, and it's pulling in a lot of language that you would see there, and just creating it into some of these different personas and different ideas for critiquing this. Paste that in there. I'm going to switch my grade level to grade level 6 because we're working in 6th grade. We can also put in a person or a character. I already used this like little newspaper editor, so I'm just going to leave that one blank. But again, that's where you could put in a fun persona there. And the next part that we're going to consider is adding some of these reference materials. So with that, we can actually go into our learning studio and we can pull in a rubric. So within that chat there, I did put a prompt for the rubric.
I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second, just
Yeah.
because there's a question in the chat from Alex about how hers isn't creating instructions like yours that she feels she could just copy and paste. So she's not sure what she's doing differently, just before we move on.
And you put in the same exact prompt.
Yeah, so mine gave me like 7 steps where it's like begin by instructing the tutor to thoroughly review the student's introduction, ask the tutor to focus on whether the introduction effectively introduces claims, direct the tutor to evaluate. So it's like,
Interesting. Question for you is,
uh-huh.
do you have within your profile, are you using Claude?
I don't know what that means.
Okay. So, when things were set up, I don't know, like when you kind of entered the Chat for Schools world, but some of the profiles are under Chat GPT where others are in Claude. And so there is a difference in variation of what the chat is giving you back. We can like look into that for you, but that's what kind of comes up at the top of my head.
Okay.
Is that so we can kind of explore that a little bit further. Because yeah, the responses have been a little bit different based on what's working in the background for you.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But one way to kind of go about that is like just going back and forth with the tutor to be like, no, focus on organization. Like sometimes it just is going to be like giving you things that you don't love. And that's just the role of being a good prompt engineer. So like don't be afraid to like manipulate it and say, no, you're not understanding what I'm saying. Like be a little bit direct with that. But we can kind of play around with what might be working in the background of your tool and how to kind of support you through that. Okay, so with that, kind of leaving off here on that reference materials, and I can kind of put for purposes here for those of you whose chat may be a little funky. I'll put this in the chat for you so you can kind of follow along. Sorry, the Zoom update is kind of throwing me off today. Ooh, it's saying it's too many characters. We'll chunk it. All right. One more little chunk there. All right. So in case you like to use my instructions, without having to go back to that chat tool, I drop those into the chat. So the next part is going into, and I put that rubric prompt in the chat. So what I'm going to do is, and just for kind of like a tip, for if you are wanting to do something similar like this, as a teacher with your teachers, walking them through that, I always really love to open up multiple windows just when I'm building out the tutors, because I do like to maximize my use of chat, learning studio, all those things. So opening up multiple tabs here will help you kind of go back and forth a little bit. So within Learning Studio, if you haven't had a chance to check this out yet, this is where you can generate some different resources, and kind of thinking through as well is you could use the quiz tool. I know we can kind of generate a formative assessment within Tutor, but you can also use the quiz tool or text transformer. Maybe you want to have an example of a really strong introduction to kind of support students in. So there's a lot of other resources in here that can also support whatever you're trying to use the tutor for, to kind of just have a well-rounded experience. So feel free to explore the others, but what we're going to do is get into the rubric. So what I like to do, especially when I'm using specialized tutors for writing, is having a rubric working in the background to just take into consideration what students should be practicing. So what we can do here is we can create new rubric. We can give it a title. Now, if you are using rubrics, I'm just going to put a 2 here just because I've done this before. What you can do as well is make sure that your assignment titles kind of match your tutor, just to kind of keep everything on the same page. So like if you're creating a tutor that is a newspaper editor, use that kind of same language there for your rubric, just for easy organization there. In the assignment description, students are going to kind of what it's all about. So remember, our scenario was that they're going to be creating a little article for the local newspaper. And then here I'm going to put in those standards again. I'm also, just to cover our bases here, I'm going to put in those extra strands that we had. I'll drop those in the chat just to make sure. We'll just say 15 points. We'll say grade level 6, and then we'll generate that. What would also be a really great idea is we're going to add this into the background of our specialized tutor. But what you could also do is export this as a PDF, print them off, and have students refer to them as they're working with their tutor, so that they kind of have a direction on maybe where they want the tutor to support them in. Maybe they know that they're not really great at having a super clear introduction. And so they could even look here and take some of the language from this rubric and say, I really need help bringing in this. I really need help with this. So this is a really great way to also like just have them in the know of the process. This rubric is working in the background of your specialized tutor. What things do you think you need support with? With this also, you could even have them practice writing out something. Let's say you want them to get started with this claim, and you want them to start writing that out. Maybe they do that on paper, they self-grade themselves or peer edit it themselves with this specific rubric. And then they go into the tutor and they're saying, okay, you've done this with the peer, or you've self-evaluated on your own writing. Now let's go into the tutor and see what they think. So there's a lot of ways that you could just really provide some clear insight on what's going on with the AI tutor, and kind of build some more meaning behind that. So lots of cool things that you can do here. But so my rubric was generated. If you like the rubric, that's awesome. You can export it right away. If you need to generate a new one, you can simply do that generate tool. But I'll export this. It's going to export as a PDF. Like I mentioned, you can print that off. You can save that. Give that a name. And then we'll go back to our tutor fields, and under those reference materials, we can add that in there. And then any special instructions, we can say be encouraging. Ask students to share their writing often. Provide them with correct answers or write things out for them. There's also this Socratic method. So if you want to check that, that tutor will only ask questions and never provide answers. With writing, that can be a little tricky because they kind of do need a little bit of support and direct feedback on that. So once that's all filled out, you can click generate, and that will just take a moment, and then you're going to see the preview on the right-hand side. So just to reiterate while this is loading, on that left-hand side, I use the chat tool to come up with some different personas. This kind of happens to me sometimes in my little demo space, but it did work. Sometimes you just got to refresh. So we use the chat tool in the subject or topic to come up with ways, personas to engage students with that learning standard. I attached my grade level. I left out a person or character just because I'm using a little newspaper editor character instead. And then I have attached a file for a rubric to be working in the background and added some special instructions. So here on the right-hand side, remember one of my tips was using the preview mode. So being able to check that out and kind of see how it's going to interact with students before you export it to their sections. I've been talking a lot about claims, so I'm just going with going with what's at the top of my head right now. So what you can see here is I asked it a question. This is what my topic is going to be about for my local newspaper, and that is going to come back with me. So here are some questions to help guide you. Who is your intended audience? Why is this important to them? What would you argue? So it's giving me some clear direction on where I should go next with my writing. Some clear ideas for really tying this back to be more descriptive and really helping me have a well-rounded response. So there we have our response there. Now, if you're like, actually, this isn't working exactly how I would hope, here on the left-hand side, you can go in and you can tweak whatever you would like. You can also generate a quiz here, which will generate a formative assessment. This is going to pull right in from that subject or topic that you completed. So there it's going to take into consideration anything that anything that the tutor is working on. So it's going to pull from there to create a quiz. And then after students have a specific amount of interactions, that quiz will unlock for them. They can take the quiz, they'll get their responses, but then they can continue interacting with the tutor. So just because they take the quiz doesn't mean that they're done being supported by that tutor. You can edit the answers, you can add questions, and so on. So once this is in that place that you would like it to be, you'll be able to export that to whatever section you would like it to go to within your Chat for Schools account. So those are some tips for being able to use multiple tools within the Chat for Schools platform to really have a structured, well-rounded, specialized tutor. Next week, we will kind of show off things that have already been created by current teachers. So kind of just taking in all these ideas and kind of grabbing things from other teachers and thinking, how can you use this for Spanish? How can you use this for art? How can you use this for so many other things? So there will be another opportunity to kind of explore more options with our specialized tutors. But in the meantime, just really encourage using that chat tool to really explore some of those standards, using any rubrics, and then also just encouraging a lot of that openness with your students. And I think just a simple rubric can really support them with knowing, this isn't just coming out of nowhere. These tutors are really helping you learn things that we're supposed to be learning in class. So learning targets, learning standards, all those good things, just being transparent with what's working in the background, I think is a really great place for our students to be. The other thing before I kind of let you ask questions is I just want to reiterate that within that progress within our tutors, you're able to sift through the different tutors that you've exported to your students, and you'll be able to view those full interactions. So on the left-hand side, you can view that tutor interaction. On the right-hand side, if you generated a formative assessment, you'll be able to see how they performed on the quiz. So again, when we think about the teacher's role within AI within the classroom, just because they do have a little assessment that is assessing students on how they've learned that standard, that left hand interaction between the student and the tutor is really going to provide a lot of insight on where some reteaching may need to happen, where some small groups need to be pulled in, or perhaps where students are at with something like creating a clear claim and a piece of writing. So really encourage that to be super helpful as you use AI to make lives easier, but also just provide even further insight. So kind of a last minute extra tip there. But what questions do we have on anything Chat for Schools? Really, I can hopefully answer or seek one out for you. Or creating these different tutors.
Just as a little update, I did, per your advice, add on like an additional instruction to like, can you format these instructions so that I can just copy and paste them? And they came out much better.
Okay,
So
awesome.
thank you for that prompt
Yes.
engineering hint. That worked really
Yes.
well.
Love that. Yeah, I really love leaning into the prompt engineering because when we think people ask me sometimes, and even my dad asked me last night about AI, and I said, well, AI really means nothing if you don't know how to use it. So same for us, same for kids. So love that. Anything else? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we are done early. You can enjoy the rest of your day. If you have further questions that you'd rather have some support one-on-one with, please don't hesitate to reach out to whoever you've been chatting with from Skillstruck or myself. And keep your eyes on some events. We will have, again, that one next week, kind of just showing off what teachers are doing with specialized tutors in their classrooms. So real examples from what's been going on. And in the future, we'll be even leaning into how you can use our Learning Studio, Tutor Creator, Chat for Schools chat to do some things around project-based learning and planning for that. So lots of good things coming up to try to set everyone up for success for the fall. So feel free to check out that events page. I see a great question in the chat. We do have text to speech and speech to text capabilities. So if students are more comfortable speaking into the chat tool, that is an option from the tutor component and even that chat component. The other thing that I like to talk about with that is, again, kind of that prompt engineering idea of if students are receiving information from the chat or from the tutor that is a little bit beyond, a little bit above their reading level, there's tons of tips to teach students about getting what they need from the tool, such as, could you explain that to me in fewer sentences and fewer words? Could you explain this to me as if I was a third grader? So there's a lot of great tips and tricks to really empower students for using AI and getting it to the place that they need it to be at their level. So I feel like, Alex, you probably kind of figured that out a little bit yourself today as an adult, but same thing that we really should be mindful of when bringing this into classrooms for students. But you are able to adjust like reading levels for individual students in your section. So that helps a little bit too. All right. Well, if you don't have any questions, you're free to go. If you need further support on, hey, I have this coming up, and I'd really love a example of a tutor, we're happy to help build those out for you as well. So reach out to us if you need anything, and we are here to support you.